Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I'm your host, Michael, episode 357. I'm sorry for the late start for those who may be checking us out live on YouTube. Joining us this evening, Gail from Communities Digital News and NY Fights, Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing, Daniel from the Inscriber and For Boxing News. Hope to have him on in a bit. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, live YouTube show podcast slash site and blog that discusses all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we'll talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. To find all information regarding the show, the site is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us, you can do so, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you'll find links to where to follow us, where to check out the show, all over the socials, Facebook/Meta, Twitter, Tumblr, IG, as well as the links to the YouTube page. Also, where you can find the show out on podcast platforms, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, anywhere, everywhere else between. Also, where you can donate to the show, guys, PayPal, Cash Me, donation links there. And also, even though I've said it before, I'm not technically a Beachbody coach right now. I'm taking a bit of time off from that. I still suggest you check out the link that's on Beachbody on the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. The link to Beachbody on Demand. If you're looking to get your body right, get ready for the summer. I would advise that you check out Beachbody on Demand. All kinds of programs for all interest. If you're into weightlifting, I would suggest Lift 4. Got a new version of Lift 4 coming this summer. If you are looking for something really challenging, full body, athlete kind of workouts like 645, 6 weeks of the work, still got the old P90X series, 1, 2, and 3, the Insanity Asylum series. If you like getting stuff in the morning meltdown. The ladies like those workouts, as well as bar blend, PIO, anywhere, everywhere else in between. You even have series where you can bind different programs into one workout. Or if you're looking for a boxing specific workout, I suggest you check out 10 rounds, 8-week program where it consists of 5 workouts a week, 6 workouts a week, excuse me. No, 5 workout weeks, 5 days a week, excuse me. 3 days consist of boxing based cardio, 2 days consist of resistance / weightlifting work. So yeah, check out Beachbody on Demand. Take advantage of the 2-week trial, and that is for 2 weeks you get free access to all programs on Beachbody on Demand. Let's get things going.
Wait. I have to interject.
What?
I don't do that. I do this one day a year, one day out of 365 days a year. We are doing the show. This shows the dedication of our producer, host, founder. It is Brother JR's birthday tonight. All bow down. Wish him a happy birthday. Get on that social. Give him your thanks for this show and just being the man he is. Happy birthday, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the birthday love that I've received, publicly and privately. Those who reached out to me, including the fun ribbon that I got from my brothers over at Three Kings Boxing.
They were lit today.
It was all the fun.
Good job, guys.
They told me it was coming. Please check out my brothers over at threekingsboxing.com. Your source for pure, unadulterated boxing information. The head of Three Kings 2K, head of media relations Bo, lead journalist Bakari, senior writer Jarrell, aka Big Cool. I'm also a senior writer over there, the editor of Red. Again, threekingsboxing.com. Check out their Facebook page. Check out the IG page, the Twitter page, as well as the podcast on YouTube. It was all in fun, but they gave me the business. I really appreciate having me on part of the team. I've been on there since 2018. So yeah, threekingsboxing.com, your pure unadulterated source for boxing information. Let's get things going, ladies and gents. Recapping fights, and let's head to card that took place on ESPN, headlined by Edgar Berlanga, fighting Steve Rolls. Steve Rolls, some people may remember him from his TKO loss to Gennady Golovkin a few years back, Gail. And he got in the ring with Berlanga. Berlanga, a lot of hype from ESPN and whatever, won his first 16 bouts by knockout. His last few fights has gone the distance. And I wasn't able to see this fight fully, Gail. I was covering a card for Three Kings Boxing, as a matter of fact. But based on from what the footage that I saw, as well as checking out my feed on Twitter, Berlanga, he got the win, but he wasn't that impressive. There seemed to be a thought that Berlanga, he's kind of plateaued in terms of his development. Uh, simply put, do you agree? Do you think that his handlers, that Top Rank, is rushing him too soon? Not even in terms of maybe opponents, but trying to jump the gun in terms of how good they think he is, making him a headliner and whatnot. Does he even deserve headliner status at this point?
He absolutely doesn't, but in some ways, it's not Berlanga's fault. So we all know the story of him rolling up fight after fight after fight, won by first round stoppage. So he gets in a roll of 16 fights by first round stoppage. Now, you look at the guys he's doing this to, and with just a few exceptions, not the most inspiring rundown of opponents. Well, then Top Rank thinks after this performance, they're going to start putting him in the tougher fights. And now for 3 fights in a row, starting with his 8-round fight against Nicholson last about a year ago, he's gone the distance now 3 times. And in fact, in his last fight, he got knocked down in the 9th round. So what does this say? Well, what it says is, in my opinion, Top Rank and their matchmakers made a big, big mistake buying into this first round knockout hype. Because this poor young guy who's got talent gets through 16 fights, and all he's had is barely 16 rounds of experience, which, a lot of guys, they've got that much after 3 fights. So, they're expecting a lot from him that he wasn't properly prepared for. And now they've got a dilemma on his hands because they way oversold him. And, they're in a position now, what do? Toss him on the trash heap when it was their own fault? That's not fair. He hasn't lost yet, although he came pretty close to a very, very narrow loss, in my opinion, on Saturday. He is essentially still a beginner, and he needs to re-rack, go back to the fundamentals, and stop being in love with the idea of scoring that one shot, one kill, one punch performance. He's got to start working on his skills. One of his complaints about Rolls is that, I can't hit somebody if they're running around the ring. And now everybody who saw this fight is going to say, oh, I'll get in the ring and just run around. Well, young man, it's not your opponent's job to stand in front of you and let him hit you, right? That is not how boxing works. And that told me everything I needed to know about him. He is completely redeemable. He's got, easily the same potential he did the first few fights, but he needs to step backwards, go back to where he should have been when he was transitioning from 4-round to 6-round fights, and get in some work, just like he had over the weekend on Saturday against Rolls, but off the main event, off TV, Let him work without the spotlight, the pressure. I just don't think it's doing him any good at all. Maybe he needs a little change of trainer. Maybe he needs a change of scene. I don't know. But if Top Rank thinks he's coming back and they're going to put him in the main event headline spot in June for a Puerto Rican Day weekend fight, that is a bad idea. And I get it. He showed a lot of promise. They got him hyped. And, to his credit and also his fellow Puerto Rican Xander Zayas, they sold out the Hulu Theater in New York at Madison Square Garden. That's great news for Top Rank. I guarantee you they made money on that, given what they probably paid everybody on the card. But if they want him to have a long, prosperous career, they got to do a serious rethink. Rolls did what Rolls does. He's got skills. He was cautious. He was by far the less busy fighter, which is why I did see Berlanga winning the fight. And that's a dog toy you're all hearing squeaking in the background. But
it seems like your boxers are showing more fight than Berlanga apparently showed in the ring Saturday night.
Well, one of them's got a toy that's got squeakers in it that's a snake, which I refer to as the Latin snake, and I'll leave it at that.
I'll go to you, Jacob, but I have to step back and go back to something Gil said about Berlanga. He's upset that folks are moving around on him. Sir, this is not Burger King. You don't have it your way. No one's going to stand in front of you and appease what you want to do. What kind of entitled privileged comment is that? As much as I'm having issues with his development, I'm even more disturbed by that comment. Your reaction?
Yeah, I think this is just a case of Berlanga had a lot of hype behind him because of the streak of knockouts. But if you look between the lines, you can see that the opponents weren't anything to write home about, right? So, in all essence, you probably should be doing that. But I'm not so sure that he, I don't think we've seen enough of him to see whether he is going to actually have the skill set to transition into something, more than a potential prospect. I wouldn't even call him a prospect at this point, but potential prospect. But if he's complaining about, people moving around, there's ways that you can get your fighter to stand still, which, one is being able to cut off the ring, which he's terrible at. Two, focus on the body, and slow your man down. So, these are things that I think most boxing fans and most fighters know. These are things that you work on in the gym and skill sets that you develop so that you can, manipulate your fighters into doing what you want them to do. Setting traps for them, fighting at the pace that you want to fight, the distance that you want to fight. So, that's just a kind of an ignorant comment, from a young kid that, probably got a little bit too much too fast and, hasn't really developed into, the person that everybody wanted to see. And his corner was giving him advice, but he just wasn't following it. He was loading up on his punches. He wasn't, using his jab effectively. To set up his shots. He was smothering himself at times and falling in and like kind of off balance. And Rolls was, and for all intents and purposes, he was kind of fighting scared. In the pre-fight, talks, Rolls was basically, I thought he would fight a little bit differently because he was like, oh, well, I'm older. This is kind of my last shot. I need to win this fight because, nobody's really knocking down my door to set up fights with me, so I got to make an impression here. So what better than to take out, a young buck, but he didn't really fight that way. And although I did give Berlanga the win, just barely, he did show a lot of like deficiencies, defensively, like he got hit, Rolls could have just kept on hitting him if he engaged a little bit more or was a little bit more active, and he probably could have won that fight. and maybe even stop Berlanga, at least knock him down. But it didn't happen that way. It was a showcase card in general. Like Gal said, they packed that place, and so there were some other fights on the card that were a little bit more to look at. But as far as Berlanga, I just don't really see the long term talent there if he doesn't if he doesn't listen to his handlers, and if he doesn't develop some of these skills to to do the things that he wants to do.
I see Daniel has joined us from Four Boxing News and the Four Boxing News and the Inscribe. We're going to split these fights shortly because of so many matches that we have to break down. But I want to get him into this discussion right now. We're talking Edgar Berlanga, his decision win over Steve Rolls that took place this last Saturday. Before you got on, Gail, Jacob, myself, we expressed a bit of disappointment in Berlanga in how he performed. I want your reaction to what you saw from Berlanga against Steve Rolls, Daniel.
It's a bit disappointing, but a little bit expected considering who the trainer is, and what they're trying to turn him into. Because obviously, the main thing that Berlanga had was I knock people out. I knocked him out in the first round, but lately he's trying to become more of a boxer rather than a puncher. And unfortunately, it looks to be that is more so to his detriment because he's not capitalizing when Rolls was hurt a little bit, and he was hurt sometimes in the middle rounds, and he laid off a little bit of the steam once it got into the late rounds. So it's not, fortunately, it's not a good sign that is happening, but at the same time, these are the areas you need to work on before you get into any type of level of contention. And he needs to start learning these things now because if you try to just make him just a full blown knockout machine, if you just get somebody like, for example, like the undisputed one, Mr. Alvarez, you're gonna have to box a completely different style, and he already knows how to not get knocked out, and he has a pretty good chin on top of that. So unfortunately, these are the learning lessons that he has to go through. Aesthetically, unfortunately, it doesn't look good, especially with what Xander did in the co-main.
I'll go back to you. First of all, forget Alvarez. I've heard people talk Berlanga and David Benavidez, and I'm like, okay, no, Benavidez would destroy this guy. Um, it would be a no contest. So, in terms of Berlanga, I give him a bit of a pass because he's still young and developing. However, he still has more work to do before his camp, before a top rank considers him any level of big time. I know he's technically ranked, but I don't consider him a world level fighter at this point. He has to get back. He has to. There's things that he has to work on in all facets of his game. You mentioned Daniel. You mentioned Xander Zayas. We talked about him a lot. Rapidly developing, now 154 pounder. Fought a guy by the name of LaVallais. I didn't see this fight again. I was covering fights for 3kingsboxing.com. But from everything I read, even though he went the distance and apparently he was given a good test, uh, a fighter who is thought to be someone of potential, he stepped up to the plate apparently in this fight, and he kind of raised his level, giving what you saw, Daniel, and then you can follow up Jacob and Gail. Was that the case?
It looked good. Like I said, the way Xander went into this fight, he went fairly well. He didn't try to rush it, and the best thing that happened into it is that he let the fight come to him. He didn't, like I said, he didn't try to expedite Nakathila what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, he did break him down. He did make him succumb to the attrition. And you mentioned it, like this is a young kid that's already starting to recognize those type of signs. So that shows real good development at that stage. And you're especially going to need it now as he's stepping up because they're obviously not going to put him anywhere near title picture within the next 2 years. So that's something that has to be commended as far as how he's shaping up, how he's timing his punches, how he's starting to recognize in the later rounds how to close a fight rather than just trying to get it down early. So overall, good fight when it comes to what he needed to do, and he's still young, so that works out.
Jacob Gale, your assessment of Zayas's performance against LaVallais. Excuse me if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
No, I thought I was really impressed with Zayas. I've seen him a few times now. I think he's coming up the right way, and his competition has been a little bit stiffer. But I really like the maturity that he's showing in the ring, of not rushing his work. Like kind of how Daniel was saying, like not, I wouldn't say like letting the fight come to him, but just being patient. Like not overdoing it or trying to knock his guy out. Like he's kind of like computing and looking for the opportunities, and he's taking advantage of it, using a lot of combinations, working the head, working the body, nice punch selection. His balance is good. He seems to have a decent defense awareness and ring generalship. So I think this guy has potential. I think it's a little too early to say, is this, the next, Puerto Rican, I guess, superstar, heir apparent to, the Cotto and the Tito and all that. But for as young as he is, he's very mature. I think boxing wise and just the way he thinks in the ring. So I was impressed with his performance. But I agree. I don't think he's ready for like any type of title shot yet. I would like to see him, get, he's very active. I think he had like 6 fights or whatever last year. So, keep him active, keep on putting him in there with the tougher and tougher guys, and let's see this kid develop.
Your thoughts, Gail?
The kind of fight Zayas had this weekend is the kind of fight that Berlanga should have been having. Zayas has been brought, they're 2 sides of the coin. Zayas has been put in against the right guys at the right level. There's been no panic with him going rounds. He's put in a lot more rounds for his bouts overall than Berlanga. He's a little younger, so they've been apparently willing to slow roll him a little bit, and you can see the difference. He's been allowed to develop. It is really hard to keep in mind when you watch them that he's 19 years old. He's 19 years old and put on that kind of a mature performance, patient. He was not looking for the one shot. He was working on his craft, working on all his skills, including his power punching. His footwork is super. His accuracy is really impressive. He has a nice array of punches. And outside the ring, he's very charismatic. He knows how to sell a fight. He's just a nice kid. He's got a good head on his shoulders, good parents. His manager, Peter Kahn, they've got him in absolutely the right gym in Miami, around other people he can learn from and emulate. It's a really good path that he's on. No, he's not ready for a title shot, and he'd be the first one to tell you. So here's what's scary. So he's fighting. He's 5'10". He's fighting at super welterweight. He could easily go up. We can see he's going to be up at middleweight when he's ready. Perhaps can go to super. This kid doesn't even have his man strength yet.
Right.
That's scary as hell if you're a potential opponent. You're seeing that and thinking, okay, he's 19 and he doesn't have a fraction of the strength he'll have maybe even in 3 or 4 years. Oh my God. If there is an heir apparent between Xander Zayas and Edgar Berlanga, I'm sorry, it's Zayas. It's not Berlanga. There's just every bit of upside to this guy. Michael, I think you've interviewed him. I interviewed him just a few fights into his career. And just some guys, you just know they've got the goods. This guy's got the goods.
Indeed. The talent is obvious. It's just oozing out of the kid. Should they put him in there with a top 10 guy right now? Absolutely not. He still has some things to work on. But the progression, I like what Top Rank is doing with him, and the development will continue on through 2022 into 2023 and whatnot. And I'm not going to say he's guaranteed bank it world champion, but the potential is obviously there, and let's see how far he takes it. Let's see what Top Ranks do with him moving forward. Let's move on. I'm going to split these fights up starting now, and I'll take this next fight with headline of a DAZN card, a Golden Boy card that took place on DAZN. In California at the Galen Center in LA, as we talked about last week. Virgil Ortiz Jr. Was supposed to headline this card, but he dropped out after falling ill. Michael McKenzie was supposed to fight Michael McKenzie. Michael McKenzie, he fought on the undercard. He won, but his performance was so I really don't want to talk about it. The main event turned out to be Alexis Rocha against Blair Cobbs, who came into this bout talking all kinds of ish, right? Saying he was going to do this and he was going to do that. He not only talked about Rocha, he talked about Bud, he talked about Spence, everybody and the mama at 147 pounds. And I have to say, this is a case when you basically talk yourself into an ass whooping because that's eventually what happened. He got off to a decent start, but the main issue was him. The biggest question with Blair Cobbs is his chin. I mean, when Bernard Hopkins says that he basically has to fight the perfect fight to win, he has to keep the chin down. That's alarming. And eventually the southpaw, it was a battle of southpaw, but Rocha's power and Cobb's chin, it kind of just came together. Cobbs hurt him. Rocha hurt him round 6. He hurt him midway through the fight. And once he found his bearing and see that the punches that he could land, you can tell the end was coming near. He ended up stopping Blair Cobbs. And Rocha, after losing a few fights back, he has the look of a guy who could make some noise at 147 pounds. I like how he looked in this. I like how he fought in this fight. He was patient. He knew that Cobbs was weak with the beard, and eventually got to him and stopped him. I want to see more of him moving forward. Also, that took place Saturday, card that took place in Dubai. I'll go back to you, Gail. The headliner of this was Sonny Edwards, flyweight champion, fought Muhammad Waseem. Waseem, possibly his last crack at a world title. Edwards won by decision. I wasn't able to see this fight, but I want your assessment not only of the fight. Edwards has been barking a lot about wanting a unification bout against Julio Cesar Martinez, WBC flyweight champion. We talked about him a few shows back in his loss to Chocolatito. Given on what you saw in this fight against Edwards, do you think he's ready for the likes of a Martinez?
Well, here's the dilemma with Edwards. He's certainly earned the fight with Martinez. Does he have a shot against him? Oh, hell no. No, he doesn't. He won the fight with ease this weekend. Scores were all 116, 110, 115, 111, that range. I'm not even sure it was quite that close, but it was one of those, there's a lot of close rounds fight, a lot of close rounds type of fight. So, a couple points either way. But Edwards was clearly in control of the fight. He's got some power. He doesn't have a lot. He doesn't have the snap and the aggression of a guy like Martinez, who, even though he got completely dominated by Chocolatito here a couple of weeks ago, he is still, a champion at flyweight, and he's very skilled. He's got tons of talent, a lot of upside, and he's very exciting. He's very exciting, active power puncher. I think Edwards would just find that way too steep a hill to climb. But he's got that IBF title. He's, undefeated. He's won everybody, he's won against everybody put in front of him. So does he deserve the chance, the opportunity for that unification fight? Sure he does. And staged the right place in the right way. It's a good fight. It's interesting. I don't think the outcome is really a mystery. And I don't think I'd do it as Martinez's first fight back after losing to Roman Gonzalez. So there may need to be a little time go by, and Edwards may need another fight. Since this was in Dubai, and his last fight was also in Dubai at the end of last year, he really should fight in front of the hometown fans in the UK. That buys a little time for Martinez to get back on his feet. Maybe we see a unification at the end of the year, but I would not bet any of my hard-earned money at that point on Sonny Edwards. Sorry, mate.
I'll go to you, Jacob. On the undercard here in Dubai, a Probellum card, you had Regis Prograis, former champion at 140 pounds, fought a guy by the name of Tyrone McKenna. Ranked guy was McKenna. Stopped him in 6. Easy work for Prograis. He dominated from jump. Here's my question. Where does Prograis go from here at 140 pounds, right? He had the belt. He lost the finals of the World Boxing Super Series to Josh Taylor. Very close bout, right? But he hasn't done much since. He's ranked, but with Taylor anticipated to relinquish the titles at 140, where does Rubaru fit in the division?
I mean, we talked about this last time. I mean, he's kind of had ever since that Taylor fight and that performance, he's kind of he wasn't active. He only had one fight in 2020 and once in 2021, and then even that one fight against Redcatch wasn't even. It was a terrible fight. Yeah, I mean, I would like to see him, fight some of the top guys, because if Taylor is going to, pretty much is a guaranteed he's going to move up, which I think is a mistake, but, that's for another show. But if he's going to be, if there's going to be a bunch of belts up for grabs, I mean, he definitely has the talent to be able to be in the mix of that. But you're going to have, Ramirez, Zepeda, and the likes of those guys, trying to get those belts. So I'd like to see him, fight that type of competition and stay active. It would be a shame for him to, I guess, kind of waste his talent, or for his talent to, because he's already 33, for it to, kind of go away and he never gets that opportunity to fight, the big fights again. So, I mean, this is a kind of a case of maybe his handlers, or even himself, is his own worst enemy of not, putting himself in the mix and not asking for the big fights, or not, making the deals for the big fights, and rather just kind of stay on the sidelines and just have these, stay busy fights once a year, turning into hopefully he doesn't turn into another what's his name, Gary Russell Jr., where he just basically fights once a year, and not always for against a game opponent.
Oh, I'll get you into this discussion as well, Daniel. Your thoughts on Rougarou and his win versus McKenna, as well as where does he go at 140 pounds?
This was not a hard fight for Rougarou. You could tell on that he was dominant throughout, and he did what he was supposed to do, even if he looked a little bit tired towards the end. But like Jacob mentioned, once Josh Taylor makes it official that he's dropping all those belts, he's still in the line for it. Not only him, like mentioned, Ramirez, and a couple of other challengers that might be looking to move up to lightweight, like Mr. Teofimo Lopez. So he is part of an open field now that's going to be ready to get on at least one of these belts that's going to come into it. But he needs to stay active. He needs to put on more performances because luckily he fought tonight because we all remember the last fight he had was in that little Triller episode with Ivan Red Catch, where it just, we all know what happened there. But good on Ruger for winning the fight. Good on him for showing that he is still among the best at 140 pounds. Like I said, puts him in line for a possible title shot when the belts are free. And more than likely, they're going to be free before the middle of the year.
Shout out to Olaf the Mighty for checking us out live on YouTube. Shout out to Mr. Boumaye on Twitter. He's listening live as well. Mr. Boumaye, feel free to join us on the live chat. If you have any questions or comments, please provide. We'd love to hear from you. I'll go to this. I'm going to switch things up here and have Gail and I take the floor to talk about this last fight because we were part of a group of boxing media folks who actually saw this fight live. Took place over in Japan, the rematch between Masamichi Yabuki and Kenshiro Teraji. For fans who are unaware, the two fought last year, September. Yabuki he stopped Kenshiro in 10 rounds to win the WBC belt at 108 pounds, one of the upsets of the year. They had a rematch last week on Friday, late Friday, early Saturday, depends on what part of the country or world you were from. Like I said, Gail and I, we saw the bout. And Gail, I have to say, this was a different Kenshiro. He had the fire in the belly. He had the eye of the tiger. From the moment he stepped in the ring, let me take that back. From that ring attire that he had on, you can tell he was on one.
Right.
Charged. He came out guns blazing, came forward looking to destruct and destroy, and he did that, pummeling Yabuki, stopped him in 3. I would argue that in recent years, one of the best performances of his career. This was emphatic on the part of Kenshiro.
That defeat lit that man up. Kenshiro was not going to let that happen. He wanted to not just get a win in the rematch, he wanted to perform in a way that made everyone watching completely forget the first fight. And he did it. You're right. He had this crazy, wild, voluminous, geometric, odd, modern samurai outfit on, all in white with a hat. It's crazy, very impressive. And you just knew as he walked out that he was going to take control of the situation and put his stamp on things and prove himself. Boy, did he ever. Revenge has got to be sweet when it's delivered with a 3rd round pummeling stoppage like he did. it makes you really look back at that first fight and think, what the hell happened? I mean, you have to look at that against this performance and think, complete anomaly. Absolutely got to consider him the top of his division. It was exactly the sort of comeback performance. I mean, you couldn't really write a movie script better than that. No fans went away disappointed because they only got to see 3 rounds. It was 3 superb rounds. Measure those 3 rounds against watching Berlanga grind away. Not even close. Second by second, absolutely stunning. It's really a shame that it didn't get more exposure to American audiences. And it wasn't that it was late, but hell, we've had some American fights go on nearly that late at night as we were watching live on Friday. So do look it up on YouTube. It's absolutely worth your time to see it. Make sure if you can try to catch the ring walk and then those 3 rounds. Really a masterful performance. There's a guy who learned from his loss, was very motivated, and he delivered.
100%. He came out to kick ass and take names. He did just that. What's up for him? Who knows? Shout out to Bo, who's been on this show numerous times. He penned an article on 3kingsboxing.com proposing a unification bout against Hiroto Koguchi, who's WBA champion. I think Koguchi has a mandatory fight coming up later on this year. It would be a good match, Koguchi, a high-profile match, Koguchi and Kenshiro in Japan. Let's hope it happens later on this year. I would thoroughly enjoy it, but based on what we've seen from Teraji Gale, I tend to agree that if he keeps up that form, Kenshiro looks like the best in the world right now at 108 pounds. Let's move on to some news, and I'll start this off with you, Daniel. We all know the situation, the ongoing war when it comes to Ukraine, the Russian invasion, the Putin invasion, of Ukraine. Oleksandr Usyk, Wasyl Lomachenko had decided to go back to the country, fight with their comrades and be with their families, right? News has broke this week, kind of an update on those two. Apparently Lomachenko has decided that he's going to bow out a June 5th battle with George Kambosos, unified lightweight champion. It looks like now Kambosos is in the middle of negotiations for a fight with WBC 135-pound champion Devin Haney. So Lomachenko has decided to bypass that fight, while it seems that Usyk there's a deal in place for him to now leave Ukraine, and he's going to apparently begin training for the rematch with Joshua. What have you heard in terms of updates regarding those two men?
As far as from what I've seen when it comes to Loma, this was probably a decision that had to take into the account the fact that the fight with Kambosos was going to be in Australia, and Australia is still doing a quarantine period for COVID. So he had to get out extra early on top of having the training camp, which unfortunately doesn't work given the current situation. Now, Usyk is a little bit interesting because it wasn't a situation where he was asking to leave. Because apparently, remember, this all blew up yesterday.
Yeah.
Because Mike Hoppinger decided to put out a tweet and later an article saying that the Ukrainian, I think, sports minister, a government official in Ukraine, has given permission to Usyk to leave the country to train and have to fight with Joshua, which was immediately napalmed a little bit by Egis Klimas. In fact, Egis Klimas pretty much demanded that no other press talk to his fighters. So for a bit. But this is a pretty interesting situation when you start to look at it because at the beginning, unfortunately, of this, let's just call it the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Usyk was one of the first like major people to go to the army, to the forces. Loma was hesitant for a bit until he finally went. Now, this could be a rewarding gesture as far as the fact that they let him go and do train for this fight. But they also understand, but policies also have to understand that if this is actually true, this it probably wasn't the way they wanted people to find out. More than likely, it was probably they wanted to have a Ukrainian official come out with a press conference or some type of press event saying like we're going to allow this. He's going to rep, he's going to represent, and then immediately whatever way it comes out, they're going to come back to the front lines. So it wasn't a situation where they were going to want Mike Carpenter to break the news because in one way it is a little bit of a PR hit because obviously you said he went in to defend his country and this looks like either you or your representatives asked out even it was for a little bit to have a fight to make money. So far, that looks to be the case. And unfortunately, as much as I know that all of us here probably do not like Mr. Carpenter, he's more or less right when it comes to some of the pieces that he puts out, unfortunately. Because it wasn't an opinion, like he's putting it out as hard news. So, more than likely, yeah, we're probably going to have Usyk leave Ukraine, train for train for the Joshua fight, and then probably come back in. As far as Loma's going to go, he's going to get the winner of Kambosos and Haney either way. Because just because he's not stepping away from this fight, the WBO is not going to take away his mandatory status. They're probably going to keep it. They're going to make some understanding gesture, and then once those two have a fight, and if this situation dies down, Loma will just go after the winner and probably reclaim his belts from either one.
The problem with Carpenter, he's not wrong. The reason, and I'll say it here, that you have so many, that he's such a lightning rod with so many in the boxing community is that he'll get information and just leak it without folks' permission. That's what happened here. He got the word. He probably had a discussion with Clemus or folks associated with Clemus, and then just threw it out there in the boxing ether. And Clemus was like, he did what Daniel said. Basically, he chastised Carpenter publicly for what he did. That is part and parcel why Carpenter is not. He's a bit of a lightning rod. He's not a friend among those within the boxing press or promoters or managers and whatnot. He comes off as being not trustworthy at times. I'll go to you, Jacob. Given the news regarding Loma, the ongoing talks with Haney and Kambosos, they tried to make this fight before. I pinned an article for Three Kings Boxing. You can check it out right now. I pinned it earlier today where Hearn says that he hopes that they can get things finalized in a week's time. He says that money is not an issue. He says that Haney is willing to take less money, understanding that he's the B-side. Simply put, Jacob, do you think this time around, Kambosos and Haney, will that fight get made?
I don't see why not. I mean, I've believed this for a long time that if the two fighters want to fight, they can figure it out. Obviously, Haney's going to have to be the B side in this. Kambosos is holding. It's going to be in his backyard, which he's earned. And he has the belt, so he should be able to dictate terms. And I always say this is that I don't know why some of these guys, if they really believe that they're going to win, why do they fight about outside the ring, fight about being the A side or all this stuff? Because if you win and you win all those titles and you're the undisputed champion, then now you can write your own ticket. You can now you can make the moves. You're the queen on the chessboard now. So hopefully, there isn't. Hopefully they kind of succumb to all the right details so that they can make this fight happen. But I'm kind of pissed at the Russians because not only did we miss out on a fight against Loma and Kambosos, but the gas prices are killing me.
Oh gosh, and you in California as well, $6 a gallon. Yeah, it's hitting you hard. Let's move on, Gail, to Usyk, and then he's allowed now that he's going to train for Joshua. Hernandez also says that he's hopeful a rematch between Usyk and Joshua. He's hopeful that can happen in June. Based on your observation, based on the folks you're talking to, is Hearn kind of on with his thoughts? Usyk Joshua rematch happening in June?
I don't know about that quickly. This is a pretty fluid situation. We think Usyk's coming back. Let's find out. Let's make sure he gets out alive, for God's sakes. I mean, there's no guarantee right now.
Yeah.
So what shape does he come back in? What has he experienced? Let us not downplay the trauma, the emotion of what's going on in his country. And we know Usyk is a very spiritual man. He's a family man. In some ways, very much like Ramon Gonzalez is. And I imagine this has hurt him in ways that we can't really imagine and maybe not predict once he's out of there. If there was ever somebody who, might realize a very delayed case of PTSD or some other kind of mental health effect, I wouldn't be surprised, and I would be very concerned about it. So let's see what happens. I think Eddie Hearn has grasped the situation as much as the promoter could for the potential of the fight, and will make as many accommodations as he can. And the truth is, what other options does he have? There are not a lot of really good ones. So let's hope everyone gets out, is okay. I happen to see the Klitschko brothers both being interviewed on CNN tonight over the situation, which, has just really got to blow the minds of every boxing fan in the world who has watched them as athletes and now sees them as leaders of this nation of very proud people resisting. It's truly an amazing story. This is the kind of stuff movies get written about. This is real life, folks. So it's fun to talk boxing, and I'd love to see a rematch, but let's keep our eyes on the ball here.
Yeah, just put things in perspective. The plight that they're going through, fighting for their people against a war that they had nothing to do with. They didn't ask for this. This was brought upon them by, let's face it, a dictator. And you also have to be sensitive. You have to be sensitive to that, and there are issues dealing with the after effects of that, particularly when it comes to Usyk as he apparently gets ready for Joshua. Will it happen in June? I don't know. Prayers go out to Lomachenko, who has decided to stay back, to stay in Ukraine and with his people, with his comrades, and we'll just keep you abreast of the situation moving forward. I get all of you into this discussion about what I'm about to talk about next, and that is stuff popped up on boxing Twitter and boxing social media today. Rumors regarding Terence Crawford. This goes back to a interview with his trainer Bomac um, on Twitterverse, uh, in which people are suggesting, intimating that, well, Bomac basically said that Crawford's next fight is going to be either in June or July. Now, people have taken that discussion and kind of run with it and suggested that Crawford there's an impending move with Crawford over to PBC, the possibility he's going to self promote over there. Going to get you all into this discussion. Your reaction to that talk with Bomac. Is Crawford moving over to PBC? Are people just jumping the gun when it comes to this interview? What do you make of all of this? Anybody who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I don't. I think what we're discovering, and I don't think this is like a new concept, but it's becoming a more common concept of fighters once they get to a certain level, right? They're not beholden to a promoter or two contracts or long contracts, let's say. And Bud is in that situation. He was with Top Rank for a long time. I think he was a little. I think I even made a prediction that he was going to leave Top Rank. And it was probably some years back, maybe like even 3 or 4 years ago, um, because they weren't getting the fights that he wanted. And now with like someone like Canelo, right? He's not with Golden Boy anymore. He can kind of sign these one fight deals or two fight deals and fight at whatever weights and he can basically write his own ticket. And I think a lot of these fighters are going to start to take their cues from that and doing these like little short deals to get the fights that they want, the meaningful fights without having to get involved in the politics of boxing, which is, this promoter doesn't like this promoter, or he doesn't want to work with him, or, they don't want to, make concessions on, where it's going to be held at, or who's going to be the A side and the B side, blah, blah, blah. So, the politics of boxing, in more recent years have really screwed up or cheated us out of a lot of fights of people in their prime, on fights that we would love to see. But because of all this, back and forth, it just doesn't materialize or it gets past its expiration point. So I think it's likely that he can sign. It's only 2 fight deal, and if they can guarantee he's going to fight the winner of Spence Ugas, let's say, and then defend against whoever the number one contender or even a rematch, the winner of Spence Ugas. And he's going to get money and be able to establish himself as the unified champion. I mean, that's kind of the best case scenario. Obviously, he's in a position he can do that. He has a name. This is not going to be the case for I think most people that can't, maybe put butts in the seat or don't have a name or a belt or something to basically leverage. But I'm not surprised.
Daniel Gill, what do you say about all of this? This is just people just blowing this out of proportion.
Well, first let's give credit to where this came from. Like I said, this came from a Twitter space called Chicken Talk, who were also like the people that got the early news of the Denny Roman Steve Colbert fight. Sorry, of the Denny Roman fight pretty early from Roman's manager. So they have gained a little bit of credibility. Now, when it comes to this scenario, I think people are deducting because of the fact that as far as the weight classes go, it's the only logical move that you can make. If you're going to be fighting in June or July, because obviously, if you were challenging anybody in the WBO, Golden Boy would have had Virgil done it, but right now, there's a good chance that Virgil is not going to fight at welterweight again.
Yeah.
So given that, that takes away Golden Boy and the zone out of any particular running. So, what options do you have? Would you go back to Top Rank for a fight with Josh Taylor? Which, by the way, would be pretty interesting considering I think the lawsuit is still active between Bud and Top Rank. So as far as the major players go, the only logical option, is to do PBC, and obviously the main fight is that the one has to fight with Spence. The problem what I have is the reason why I'm not fully running with this, and why I say as soon as that lawsuit happened that there's a good chance that Bud's not going to fight at all this year. We don't know what's going to happen as far as the courtroom goes, because you still have to do the pre-trials, you still have to do depositions, and that can affect anything as far as your training, your regimen, your schedule. So we need to have like a more confirmed area, but I can see how people have deducted that it should be the PBC. It's the most logical move to make given the circumstances. Let's say barring Virgil making a outstanding recovery and willing to make welterweight, and Golden Boy just saying, you know what, let's not take any more tune-up fights. Let's go through it with the mandatory. Other than that, it's the only move he has.
Apparently the discussion was, there's a 2-fight deal in the works based on this Chicken Talk interview with Bomac. I listened to it, at least the last portion where this was allegedly been, said to have been leaked out. I didn't hear anything like that. I did hear Bomac saying, listen, if Errol Spence wants to go to the Hall of Fame, that road goes through Bud Crawford. He's not wrong about that. But he also said, of course, Spence has got to defeat your Dennis Ugas first before we can even have that discussion. He's right about that. That's not a gimme for Spence in the slightest. We need to make sure that he's focused on that fight, gets through that fight. Everybody knows that is the hub around which Crawford is pivoting, is what happens there. I think the lawsuit is less of an influence that he's got working against Top Rank than the fortunes of Errol Spence. Yeah, so what are the other options for Crawford? Well, it seems to me he's going to go the same route Canelo did. A fight deal here, a fight deal there, is his own independent player. He can sign for 2 fights. He can sign for 1 fight. I don't think he's going to sign for any fights just now. He can wait it out until he sees what Spence Jr. looks like. But I'd be very, very surprised if it was a 2-fight deal. I've been wrong before, but it's certainly not based on anything I've heard or read right now. I certainly got no information that would lead me to conclude that. That seems to really be jumping to conclusions. And I'll say about that and about the whole issue with Mike Coppinger, Igis Klimas, and his fighters. Everybody somehow conveniently forgets all the times you broke a story and you were wrong. And something, you can make an educated guess. Coppinger knows what's going on in boxing. We know to an extent what's going on, how things work, how deals get made, who's dealing with who, the financial sides of it, the promoter issues, the legal issues. And we can make an educated guess that percentage-wise is probably a bit more likely to be right than an average fan without access to that information. But it's still a guess. It's still a coin toss. And sometimes you're going to hit it and be right, and sometimes you're going to be wrong. But it's a guess. It's not news. It's not verified. Let's just remember that, everybody. When somebody puts out sources say, and down the road it turns out, turned out to not be correct. Well, you know what? No shit. No shit. Or sometimes it turns out to be right. Well, no shit. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. That's the pressure that people in the business feel, especially when you work for a big machine like ESPN. Scoop, 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 first, and mistakes get made when you are running around not verifying things, not taking the time. It's just sloppy. When we all of us at work, when we try to do something fast instead of right, that's what happens. That business is no different.
Indeed, indeed. You mentioned in the private chat, Jacob. I should have put this in the docket, but yeah, Golovkin, lawsuit, Golden Boy, going back to the fight with Canelo. What do you make of this and the timing of this lawsuit happening now?
It's kind of funny because it's like Golden Boy got basically pushed out of Canelo, that whole relationship, and then now they're doing this third fight, or if they win and everything works out, possibly this third fight, and then you got this lawsuit coming right before they even step in the ring, talking about loss of promised revenue and whatnot. So yeah, I think it's Golden Boy is kind of in a bad spot right now. I mean, they lost their cash cow. Their number one prospect and Ortiz is sidelined for we don't know how long, and now they got this other lawsuit. So I don't know. It's not good times for Golden Boy right now. That might be
you want to have? Oh, my bad, my bad.
No, I was just saying they might be turned to Bronze Boy instead of Golden Boy.
You're on it, man.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
It's an ugly situation. It's just ugly. It's unfortunate. It's a shame this couldn't have been done through some sort of mediation, behind the scenes discussion. It's very possible that this is in fact money owed. It's a dispute. It's a civil dispute. And this seems to be escalating it beyond where it needs to go. But I've absolutely no information as to whether the attorneys and the parties have tried to work it out outside the public eye or not. I think Golovkin is so fed up with the business and politics of boxing. And I think he has been for quite some time. It's clear that he's close to the end of his career. He's got one foot out the door. And anybody would try to maximize their exit payment. Again, just like the rest of us who work for a living and decide we're going to get out, if we're smart, we're going to try to maximize that severance check as much as possible, especially if we've got leverage. And he thinks he's got leverage. What's interesting to me is I don't think Golovkin has that much of a problem with Oscar himself. It was with Canelo.
Right.
The only issue that he probably has with Oscar is that Oscar sided with Canelo. I don't think they have any intrinsic bad blood. Hopkins and Golovkin do not. I do not think Eric Gomez or Robert Diaz or anybody else inside Golden Boy particularly has a war with Golovkin. And the truth is, the real beef, shall we say, was really all started by Abel Sanchez, who isn't even working with Golovkin anymore. So it's just so unfortunate with two talents like that it came to this.
I actually think that there is beef between Golovkin and Oscar, because if you remember, Oscar, kind of was selling the whole fight between him and Canelo as, oh, well, here, let us fight Cotto, and then you get the winner. And then it was like, oh, we need this to marinate. And it was just kind of like this stringing along, like, promises. And then also, I think when the whole thing that kind of soured Canelo on Oscar is that I think he made a lot of promises, to probably both fighters, saying, oh, we're going to make we're going to have this fight, and, we're going to do a third fight or whatever. And because it didn't materialize, I think, it kind of showed kind of what the Canelo was saying, is that he's kind of like a snake, he kind of like makes promises and he didn't keep them. So he didn't, Canelo doesn't like him as a person either. So maybe I think some of that politics got to Golovkin though too, and kind of speaking to what you were saying, Gal, of him being sick of the politics of boxing.
And
He's made no secret of it with several people, including me. So it's not exactly something not out there in the public. He's in more than one way. He hasn't exactly announced it in a press conference or a live interview, but it's pretty well known. Golovkin apparently had an interview with Teddy Atlas on Teddy Atlas's podcast, which dropped today. I have not heard it. I'd be very interested to see what he has to say with Teddy.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all that when it comes to this loss, I'm not surprised that Triple G would be that fed up in the politics because it's affected, unfortunately, throughout his career. We have to remember how long they were stalling him in a fight he was supposed to have with Felix Sturm in the last few decades. That cost him 3 years of his prime that he could have been here already making himself his name. And on top of that, the whole Canelo situation, I'm not surprised. And I'm not surprised that he probably spot had it with the business. And it's just now just trying to make sure that he feels that he gets his honest due. Now, like Jacob mentioned, is there a possibility that Oscar may have embellished or even lied to both Canelo and Golovkin about the possibilities of the third fight? Well, yeah, he's a boxing promoter. Promoters lie. It's part of their job description. But at the end of the day, it's more than likely this is probably going to get settled out of court because you already signed, Nick said, you already signed a deal that if you beat Murata, you're going to fight Canelo, and that's probably going to be your swan song. So good on Golovkin for, like I said, trying to get as much money as he feels he rightfully needs to have. But it is unfortunately one of those stories of really, really good fighters that get the passion taken out of them by the business of boxing.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep you updated on the situation. Let's move on to preview some fights here. I um, want to split these fights up because just for to cut down on some time here. Um, go to you on this one, Gail. This weekend, Saturday, as a matter of fact, on the 26th, you got the rematch between Kiko Martinez and Josh Warrington. Martinez scored one. Talk about big upsets. We talked about Kenshiro losing to Yabuka last September. Well, in November, Martinez just sprouted from nowhere. A lot of folks thought he was done, but he obliterated Kid Galahad to win the IBF belt. He's making his first defense of that belt against Josh Warrington. Now, these two fought in 2017. Warrington won by, I want to say, majority decision. It could have been split. Correct me if I'm wrong. But Warrington, many people feel still feeling the effects. He hasn't gotten over that uh, knockout loss to Mauricio Lara last spring. Warrington and Lara fought a rematch, but that was inconclusive as the fight was stopped due to a cut. Uh, on balance, on paper, a lot of people would feel that because Warrington is the younger guy, they would make him the favorite. But I do not know where his head is at post Mauricio Lara. Uh, is he fully there? I would not be surprised, even though Kiko Martinez is the much older guy at 36. I wouldn't be surprised if he was to walk out of Leeds, which is Warrington's hometown, if he was to walk out of the building still with the championship belt wrapped around his waist. It's just a big unknown factor heading into this rematch.
I agree 100%. I don't think Warrington is the same guy he was before standing in front of Mauricio Lara. It just, certain fighters just never recover from a beating like that. I think we're going to find out pretty quick whether Warrington has got his wits back about him or not. But I'm just not sure. Martinez, on the other hand, is his momentum is all forward. And what an amazing thing to happen to him, and basically the end of his career. Martinez has always been very respectable, very serviceable fighter. I mean, this is a guy who's had 55 pro fights at 36 years old. He's 43, 10, and 2 from Spain. Not exactly, Sergio Martinez aside, not exactly known as a hotbed of, fighting talent. But damn, he has just, ever since, his last loss was actually last year to Zelfa Barrett, of all things. And, it was not really close. He's just been on fire. And I think that momentum has a lot of meaning in boxing. The fights are won or lost mentally first. And Martinez has a completely new belief in himself, and so does the rest of the world. And Warrington's on the opposite side of that coin. So they're fighting more than just physical realities in front of them. There's that cloud in front of Warrington, and there's sunshine down on Martinez, who's sort of making his last stand. And he really has nothing to lose. I mean, yes, he has a title to lose, but he's going to go out now with his head held very high. I think he'll be very competitive. The money seems to be on Warrington. I don't know if that's just wishful thinking over there in the UK to see their local guy make a comeback. I think Martinez is going to be a very, very tough out. And he's who I'd take for my money. I'm willing to go on the ride with him. I really am.
Also on the same night of the 26th, Jacob, you have the return of Miguel Berchelt. Berchelt, last time out, he lost his WBC 130-pound title to Oscar Valdez. He got knocked out, one of the knockouts of the year in 2021. He returns to fight Nakathila. Nakathila, I believe the last time we saw him was against Shakur. Shakur Stevenson got a lot of criticism from his performance in that bout, as Nakathila, I believe, went the distance. Is Nakathila better than we think? And what do you make of Berchelt as this fight is happening at 135 pounds? Is the move up to lightweight, will it benefit him? Do you think it will benefit him? Excuse me.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting fight because I do think that Nakathila is better than maybe he's getting credit for. And coming off of a knockout like that, that Berchelt had in a fight that he was clearly losing and being outgunned by what most people, and including myself, thought he was going to overpower and beat Valdez. Sometimes those kind of losses can really turn you or kind of chip away at you enough where you're never the same fighter. So I give him credit for getting in the ring with someone like Nakathila, where there's a lot of risk there. It's not. I don't think it's an easy touch, and if he isn't more defensively sound and in this fight, we could see a possible kind of a downslide of an exit of Miguel Berchelt and not being a top guy anymore, even though he was a top guy for a long time. So I think it's going to be an interesting fight. I'm excited to see what happens.
The rematch between Martinez and Josh Warrington, that's going to happen in Warrington's hometown of Leeds, England. The fight with Berchelt and Nakathila is going to happen in Las Vegas on ESPN. Also on the 26th on a Showtime in Minneapolis, Daniel, the U.S. debut of Tszyu. Um, he was set to fight on the undercard of Mel Castano, Jamel Charlo, and Brian Castano. Of course, Castano, he had to pull out due to injury. That fight is going to happen, I believe, in April. Uh, you see Tim Tszyu, but instead, Tszyu is going to fight here on the 26th. Um, Tim Tszyu, he's been talked about a lot in his native Australia. They think he is the next big thing. Um, I've seen him fight. We've all have seen him fight. I believe if he is the goods, if he is the fighter that we think he is, um, he should win this fight and win it rather comfortably. But just like there's an unknown quantity to Warrington Martinez too, there's a bit of an unknown quantity to Tim Tszyu because he's dominated the competition. He's fought at home exclusively. He's traveling away from the comforts of Australia, fighting here in the States. Uh, what do you make of him as a fighter?
You can tell he takes a lot from his father, as far as his footwork, as far as his patience, and obviously as far as a bit of his punching power.
And how he looks. He's basically the spitting image of his dad. You just go back to Costa Tszyu, former undisputed junior welterweight champion. Just take an image of him and how he looked, say, 20 years ago. That's how Tim Tszyu looks right now.
Exactly, like, and that gives people hope. That gives people hope that he can live up to the same, like I said, the same reputation that his father had. And but remember, his father also didn't have any ground. You all remember what he did to Zab Judah, and that's how he got those titles. He did it over here. He didn't have to do it in the comfort of his home country. And this is something that is needed for Tim, because one of the knocks of Australian fighters, like Mundine, for example, is that they don't want to fight outside of Australia because they may not they may not get matched up properly, or they may not get matched up favorably the way they are there. This is the first step that Tim Tszyu needs to take in order to show the world that it's not just home cooking. That's putting him in the position where he should get the winner of the Mel Castano rematch. And it's also one good way to put your name out there, because I don't think, probably, like I said, for what we mentioned before with Cambosos, the restrictions that Australia still has to be put in as far as quarantine and such when coming to the country. I don't think he's probably not going to come back to Australia in the near future after this fight, because he knows whoever wins the the fight is going to have to be this year. And it's going to be a good way to show in this fight and to an American audience, and going into a little bit of a hotbed. That armory in Minnesota has become a bit of a hotbed in the Midwest and in the Great Plains area for boxing. So they're going to get to see a good kid that has a lot of the tools. And if we see him put it all together, you're going to see belts around Tim Tszyu.
You on mute, Mike?
Sorry, I was on mute. My bad, everyone. I'm looking forward to this. I want to see what kind of fighter that Tim Tszyu really is. Does he have the power and the physical strength that he has shown in past performances? Goucher, I should say, not Gaucher, Goucher. He may take him some rounds, uh, but in the end, Tszyu should win. Now, if he blows him out, I'm really going to be impressed. But I just want to see how he looks. I just want to see how he looks in this one. I think going to start going to it start shutting down this particular episode on that note. I want to thank Olaf for joining us in the chat. I want to thank Mr. Boumaye who was listening live as well. Going to go around the panel here. Begin with ladies first. Going to end with ladies first as always. Gail from Communities Digital News, nyfights.com for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk media strategy, or for those who want to occasionally check you out on TMZ Live. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
I am on the socials as PR Pro San Diego, especially on the boxing Twitter. My regular columns are at nyfights.com and comdiginews.com. And if you didn't catch the Zhu Gaucher news conference today on YouTube, go take a look because Dad Costa was there, and damn, he should fight at heavyweight.
And I didn't see it, but according to Gail, let's just say Costa Zoo, he's living well post retirement.
He and Marcos Maidana have apparently been sharing steaks and cigars somewhere in the southern hemisphere. But good for him. He earned every bit of it. He's very excited about his son's debut. Damn, that is one of the father-son combos in boxing that might actually have success at both sides.
Indeed. I'll go to you, Jacob, for those who want to talk to you about boxing or check you out talking about movies. You're occasionally on the Wrong Reel podcast. I think you're going to do something movie related moving on in the future. Where can folks hit you up?
First off, I want to say happy birthday again to you, Mike.
Appreciate it.
I know you had the day off, but hopefully you get to do something this weekend, or treat yourself to a nice dinner or something like that, or get together with some buddies. But I can be found on Twitter at JRATM23. If you want to talk boxing or movies, you can hit me up there and maybe even direct message me. That's probably the better way to get a hold of me.
And last but certainly not least, I'll go to you, Daniel, for those, Daniel from the Inscriber, as well as for Boxing News, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the Miami Heat and get your thoughts on that scuffle between Expostra and Jimmy Butler that took place last night. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, we got attention to Sports Center that night, but it is championship basketball. But you can find me on Twitter, folks. Roxanne RAWKZ99, and you're probably gonna start hearing me a lot more when it comes to Dolphins talk because they have gone insane over the last 48 hours, getting Armstead and Tyreek Hill.
Yeah. I'm surprised by that trade. Can Tua get them the ball on a consistent basis? Outside of quarterback, the Dolphins look like they can do some real damage in 2022. But I'm sorry, I have issues when it comes to questions. I should say when it comes to Tua Tagovailoa. Is he it? Is he that dude? Can he improve on what he did last year? But I'm getting off on a tangent here. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness with me, you know what it is. Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said at the beginning of the show, if you want to check out all things Pound for Pound Boxing Report, please check out the site p4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us, you can do so. p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you can check out links to where to follow us all over socials. We on YouTube, Facebook/Meta, Twitter, IG, Tumblr. Also links to where to find the podcast on most podcast platforms. Be it Google Podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, be it Anchor, anywhere and everywhere else between. And also where you can donate, got Cash Me a PayPal donation link. And please, again, check out Beachbody on Demand if you're looking to get your body ready for the summer. On the next episode, we will do a recap. We will do a recap of Tim Tszyu and Terrell Goucher. We will do a recap of the rematch between Kiko Martinez and Josh Warrington. on the undercard of that, going to have a women's IBF bantamweight title match between Maria Moran, Cecilia Roman, and Ebony Bridges. That's for the IBF belt at 118 pounds, IBF women's belt. We would also do a recap of Berchelt and Nakathila, and we will do a preview of a fight that's taking place on the 29th, the rematch between Pechmani, CP Freshmart, and Wangheng Miniyothin. Freshmart defeated Miniyothin to win the WBC strawweight belt. They're going to fight a rematch on the 29th, and also do a preview of fights that's happening on April 2nd. Most notably, Savannah Marshall. She's going to defend her. I believe she's going to defend her WBO women's middleweight title that could be canceled. We'll talk about that next week, but I believe she's scheduled to defend her belt against Femke Hermans. So we'll talk about that fight in specific. So yeah, I want to thank everybody who joined us this evening, episode 357 of the Pound for Pound Box Report. I for Gail from Communities Digital News, NYFights.com, for Jacob of Jab Hook Boxing, for Daniel of For Boxing News and the Inscriber. I am your host, Michael. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
All right.